One cupcake, 3 ways to shade, plus a bonus if you stick around at the end. This is the easiest way to draw a cupcake. If you already know how to draw the cupcake, you can skip to about 30 seconds into this video, and we're going to start with the shading. Oh my goodness, wasn't that the easiest way to draw a cupcake? Alright, on to method 1. Start with your lightest color and underneath put your darkest color. After that, you pass over both with your lightest color. This is going to make a much smoother blend than if you were just to do light and dark, light and dark. Now you'll just repeat this until you've covered your entire cupcake with the icing. I like to start with my lightest color right in the middle of the cupcake. I find that this really gives it some perspective. When you're going to go with your next darkest color, go to each side of your lightest color, but you'll have to go over both again with your lightest color. You have to work fast, but not too fast, because you have to have enough ink coming out of your marker for it to be able to spread. So if you were working really too fast, then the ink wouldn't come out of the pen enough and you would end up having those marker marks. Whatever you see as far as marks go on mine will go away once the alcohol has dried. I'm adding a little bit more of the darker shade on the sides just to give that perspective again, a little bit of the shading. Now that my first layer has dried, I'm going back over with my darkest color underneath to create the shading. As you can see, it almost looks like a different color altogether. That's the magic of alcohol markers. If you let your first layer completely dry and go over with the same color, it looks like a different color. It looks much darker. Continue working in light layers this way until you feel that the shading looks pretty three-dimensional. As you can see, it really makes a difference. I'm doing the same thing with my E220 with a cupcake. Sometimes I like to add little dots to the cupcake as well, because when you look at a cake, there's always some sort of a texture. It's not flat. So that's why I'm adding these little dots, just to give it a little bit more personality. So I'm going to take my darkest color now that the first layer has had time to dry, and I'm creating that shading once again. Taking my darkest color and working fast but not too fast. Then I'm taking my lightest color, going over the darkest to start so that that alcohol has time to spread, and then I'm going over the entire color again. As I mentioned before, this is going to create a much smoother blend. Adding a couple details to show the little cupcake paper. And now with a jelly roller, any kind of white jelly roller is fine, I'm adding the highlights. So think of your light source, wherever the light would hit, that's where you would put your jelly roller. It's always on the opposite side of where you did your shading. So you can never put the white jelly roller on the same side that you did your dark shading. Let's move on to method 2. This is the color on color method. We went over that a little bit in method 1, but we were blending lighter color, darker color. In this case, you're really using the same color throughout your entire first layer. So my icing, I'm not mixing two colors. I'm just going with this V030. If you're not familiar with these markers, I'm using Ohuhu markers. They're pretty smooth, and for the price point, quite reasonable, much less expensive than if you were to take Cupcake markers. So again, go through your first layer completely, just adding flat colors. So far I've only used 3 colors. As you can see, I'm working right to left, kind of in a circular motion. I feel that this gives it a little bit of perspective. Now about 5 minutes has gone by. I let that first layer completely dry, and I'm going over the first layer with exactly the same color that I was using before, and it's giving that darker color again, a little bit like I had explained in method 1. So now you look like you're working with 2 separate colors. You have the base layer that gives the highlight, and you have the second layer that is giving the shadowing. I highly recommend this method for anyone who is starting off with alcohol markers. It's the one that forgives the most. So if you make a mistake, it really isn't going to show. If you're not used to the blending, just use this method, because it really does sort of blend in on its own, as you can see. You can work in layers, and you can do this maybe 2-3 times, depending on how deep you want your shadow to be. But don't forget, every single time you have to wait for your layer to dry, maximum 5 minutes, and then go over it again. Method 3, shading with a gray. The first step is to cover your entire cupcake with your base colors. So whatever colors that you've chosen, you're going to do a flat layer throughout. Notice that when I color in, I always pass a little bit above the area that I was coloring before. This really allows for the markers to blend together. The alcohol really does need to spread, so you want to have enough ink and go at the right speed so that it spreads to the other passage that you just did. Otherwise, you're going to get those marker marks. So it's quite important to work fast, but not too fast. Now we're moving on to the gray. Why did I choose RG50? Because my base layer is a purplish pink. So I'm using a red tinted gray. Always try to stay in the same color family when you're using the grays so that it looks harmonious. So I'm doing my shading as usual, but I'm doing it with the gray. So in any area where you know that your light source would not hit, you put your gray outline. This method is a little less forgiving than method 2. If you're not used to alcohol markers, I suggest really not going to that until later. I'm using an acrylic marker to add some highlights. Sometimes I use the jelly roller. In this case, I wanted to use a more discreet highlight. Now the surprise effect. Let's pretend that our cupcake is in a room and there is a light source, like a lamp above it. You're going to, let's say you didn't have a lamp, you're going to draw your lamp, and then you're going to create lines where the light would have come out of your lamp. Just like any lamp, there's a logic in, I didn't put my light 2 inches after the lamp because that wouldn't make sense. So the light beams go underneath. Then anywhere outside of this perimeter that I drew, I am going to cover in light gray. In this case, I used the shade, I think it's a 030, but I felt like it wasn't dark enough. So if you have the Ohuhu markers, I would go to something like, now I was using WG050, I would go to WG070 because I did end up passing over that gray again afterwards. Now anywhere the light hit, I am putting a yellow outline. So this creates that effect of that yellow hue coming from the light. Next, you're going to cover the rest of your drawing as usual. You don't have to, worry about the perimeter or anything like that. So the icing, you put the purple everywhere. You should put the purple even within the perimeter. Just don't go over that yellow outline that you created on the outside, creating that light hue. So try to get as close to it as you can possibly without touching it. And that ink is going to spread a little bit into your yellow, and that's okay, but you don't want to go over it. Notice that when I cover my base, I'm trying to work from left to right and kind of like at an angle. This is just so that we can create a tiny bit of that 3D effect, the perspective. Now you're going to cover the background in whatever color that you choose. So whatever color you wanted your wall to be. Again, you're ignoring the perimeter. The only time that you did pay attention to that perimeter that you created, those lines that you created, was with the gray at the beginning. After that, you never have to worry about it again. Wasn't that effect so cool? That cupcake really looks like it's under a lamp. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.